Hi, I'm Siofra Bradigan, and this is Siofra's Magic Alcove. So, I would like to talk a little bit about the art of listening and communication, because I think it's a good subject to go over, uh, especially when we're first starting out, but at any time in your development, always watch your own thoughts and your own mind and your own memories when you're listening to a video or reading a book, whatever it happens to be, and watch for those trigger phrases, trigger words, and things like that that lead you into your own unconscious or into your past or into an assumption that you have about reality, and try to pay attention and notice those things, because it's in noticing those things that we is the beginning of shadow work. That is how we begin to see the influence our own unconscious mind has on our responses and our reactions to everything around us. So if someone is talking to you about a subject that you have like an intense emotional response to, like something that's similar in your own past, it can be very difficult to maintain a listening attitude and just sort of pay attention to what the other person is talking about without triggering yourself and going back into past trauma is one of the big ones. But not just that. Uh, a lot of times as humans, we seem to have this fear of being, um, what's the word I'm trying to look for? Um, Judged and criticized by the people around us, especially if we've had traumatic childhoods. And but even without that, it can easily be sort of a package deal with a lot of people. And so the way different people talk, like I use different phrases and mean certain things by the phrases that I use. Other people have different phrases that they have that they mean by what they're saying, that the words can mean something completely different to me in my internal reality than they do to the person who's saying them, because in their internal reality it's a different phrase. It has a different meaning. So while you're learning how to actively listen to other people, that's part of that process, is to actually hearing what they're saying. And if you start to delve into your own stuff immediately, stop yourself, stop them briefly, and ask them to give you more information about this phrase, because you want to know what their definition of that word happens to be. And this is one of the places where we have a lot of unnecessary conflict with other people, because we're not aware of this tendency of the brain, associative brains that we have. Anything that comes at us, our brain is always looking inside, trying to find what correlation does this word, phrase, topic, um, whatever it happens to be, have inside of us. And once it makes that connection, then it starts opening up other connections that are related to that, and we can get far away from the initial subject quite quickly. I'm trying to think if I can think of a good example of that. I had when I was in Texas and I was trying to do the big ritual that where I learned to open up the portal between the worlds, and I was dealing with the woman homeowner. She was a really good, clear example of that kind of thing, because the fact that I was a stranger to her, I was female, I was in her house, I said I was there to help, and she had a fairly recent experience that she completely focused on, where she was helping a woman who was pregnant, and they let her into their home. They supplied her with food and shelter. She took advantage of them. She ripped them off, and all these things, which had nothing to do with why I was there. I was there to do a ritual to try and help some earthbound spirits that had been killed in a battle, Native American spirits, so that they could leave and go where they needed to be. And none of that stuff applied to me. And I was able somehow, I think my staff helped me in that regard, to stay focused on who I was and why I was there, And every time she delved into it, which didn't take much, it was like very little would trigger that, and she'd be right into it, into that whole scenario all over again. I was able to tell, focus on her and say, that was then, this is now, that was her, this is me, this is not why I'm here, this is not what I'm doing, and instead of taking it personally, which is what some people might have done, like, why the heck should I even help you? Because you think I'm this horrible person and you only just met me. And clearly, she did not know me at all, even though we had, like, communicated via some, well, they had a MOIDA session, a distance session, and through writing and stuff like that with David. That was all they really knew. They'd never actually met me in person until then. And so they had their own assumptions before I even got there. And that's the other thing. It's like very few people come to someone without preconceived notion, even if they're not aware of the fact that they have a preconceived notion, whether it's like, that's the color I can't stand, I hate that color, I don't like what you're wearing, I don't like how you're wearing your hair, I don't like the sound of your voice, it's like you sound aggressive to me, or you're sounding too soft, so you sound like a wimp, or, we have a lot of built-in associations that we've accumulated over the years, and even fairly young. I mean, we have those things happen when we're kids, where we're trying to figure out how to arrange our lives and be in a place and be as safe as possible. And the more trauma you have as a child, the more alert you are to what you see as these silent messengers, giving you warnings and stuff like that, and being able to separate that out from the present and know that's the background and not necessarily apply can be difficult. So, active listening means, like with the talking stick, that you're not interrupting someone all the time with your own opinion about things. That's one of the things to notice about yourself. If you're having a conversation with someone and all you can think about while they're talking is what you need to tell them, then you're not active listening. That's not listening at all. That's waiting for your opportunity to talk. Not the same thing. And so if you find yourself, when are they going to shut up so I can tell them this thing before I forget it, you need to stop right then. Take a deep breath, refocus yourself, and ask them to start over, because you haven't heard anything that they've said. And if you start to assume that you know what they're talking about and come to a conclusion, and you're not looking at the conclusion based on the information that they have, but based on your own experience, and then you start responding to them based on that, it's going to be pretty confusing for the other party, because they're not going to know what you're talking about or where you're coming from. So self-awareness in this field in particular is extremely important if you're going to actually have a chance to develop real communication between you and someone else. So thinking that people are telling you that you're wrong if they have a different opinion, that's a pretty standard one. Even if the person who's telling you what they think about something isn't telling you they think you need to think that about somebody or the same thing. It's like it's an automatic thing. You think differently than me, you must think I'm wrong. And that is something we all need to deal with, because, I mean, I'm prone to that just like anybody else. I've had more practice because I'm older. I've had more experience with different types of people. And, and that helps as far as knowing that there's different ways that people communicate and so forth. When Ian and I first got together, we had some words that we had completely different definitions of, which was pretty entertaining when we were starting to figure that out. Because if you have a completely different definition for a word, anytime the person uses that word, you're going to get that meaning, not their meaning. So that's why, the being able to ask questions about it to elicit more information. And, what do you mean by that can be said as an accusatory, or as an invitation to give you more information. So you start off with something like, I'm having difficulty understanding what it is you mean by that word. Can you give me an example? of how you use that word and what it means to you so that I know what you're talking about. And people will pretty much open up right away. It's like, it allows a click in their own head to go, oh, okay, well, what I mean by this is, and then they can do a backstory explaining why that word has that meaning. I mean, there's some obvious words like love, work, like lazy. I mean, there's any number of things out there. And of course, if you're trying to communicate with someone who has a different language, that kind of complicates the whole thing because then they're translating from your language that you're familiar with to their own language and their understanding of your language, and vice versa when they're talking the same thing. So if you're communicating with someone that you know has a different language base, be extra careful and be extra inquisitive about what exactly they mean. And if you don't understand something, that doesn't mean you're stupid. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It means that you haven't made a connection in your brain between what they're trying to say and what they mean by what they say and your own experience. You haven't been able to do this click thing in your head to go like, oh, okay, I know what you're talking about. So when it comes to our videos, if you are not understanding something that you think I've said on a video, it's worthwhile to watch it again. And think about that while you're watching it. And not just ours, obviously, but anybody's. But if you can watch a video and get different things out of it depending on what frame of mind you're in at the time, whether you're tired or bored or curious or, whatever frame of reference that you're coming from is going to change slightly the meaning of the words that we use and what I'm trying to communicate versus what you're hearing. So that's why, like I said earlier in a different video or many videos, I like questions because I don't feel threatened by questions. I know my own mind. I know who I am. I know what I think. I know what I believe, and I know what I mean. And if someone thinks I'm meaning something completely different, I'm not taking that personally because I know that's wrong. I know who I am. And that's part of succeeding at the shadow work, knowing who you really are. And then not being able to be thrown by a random statement that somebody might make on the internet about what you should do about a situation because they're not in your life, they don't know you, they don't know what you think, how you feel, or anything else. Why should you take their opinion to heart? And yet we're sort of built to try to be community oriented, tribal kind of thing, and want acceptance. And so, that is one of the key things that leads to people doing things that they don't want to do, is an attempt to be accepted by another group or another person. So, if you're looking for a healthy relationship, you want to have someone who knows who they are and is genuinely interested in something that you're genuinely interested in, and not going along with you just because if they don't, they feel you won't like them or want to be with them, and that it's something that they have to do in order to gain your trust or your attention or whatever it is, because that doesn't work in the long term. There's all kinds of stuff like that. But if you can get basic communication down, the chances of finding a good partner in whatever endeavor it is, whether it's in business or it's in magic or it's in a love relationship, increases dramatically. The better able you are to know who you are and to communicate who you are and to listen to who someone else is. And I can't emphasize this enough. If someone says something that's completely and totally off and doesn't make sense to you and is like a horrible thing, believe them. They are revealing a piece of themselves. If someone jokes about being violent, that's a red flag. If somebody tries to push you into doing something you don't want to do and tries to guilt trip you into trying to do it, that's a red flag. It's like, if you're going to be with someone, you have to find someone who appreciates you for who you really are, which gives you room to grow and become a better version of yourself, or become the version of yourself you want to be, whatever that means. So, communication is such a core issue in everything that we do. People who misspell words aren't trying to muddy the waters in general. When we're having our chats or live shows, remember that I only see what is typed, and I may jump to the wrong conclusion, which I've done. Just in the last show, I did that, and misunderstand what the person is talking about, and they let me know, which is fine. But remember that that's the case. So, I can only see whatever it is that's on the screen. And then I also have that time lag where I've already answered somebody's question. I try to keep up in my brain, but I'm very focused on the moment when I'm talking to people and trying to answer specific questions. I try to give all of my attention to that and not pay attention to any of the other comments that might be coming through, and then refocus myself and then look and see what else is happening. And I think that is important because it gives you, giving you my full attention for whatever the question is. You know that you have my full attention, and I'm not going to be giving, in general, a flippant, superficial answer, but I try to answer questions as if they mean something when they're asked, whether it's just on a comment, on a video. And I'm sure if you've surfed through and seen some of our videos, there are some extremely long answers I've given to some people's questions. That's because I'm taking the subject seriously, and I am trying to explain things the best I can in the written word. Not that I always succeed, obviously, because I'm human, and words have different meanings to different people, but I try my best. And sometimes it's kind of funny, because sometimes people will say something to me, they think they're being flippant or funny or superficial or whatever, and then I'll come back at them with like a completely serious answer, and I think it takes them by surprise. But that is who I am. I am not a superficial, flippant individual. If someone wants an answer to a question, I'm going to do my best to give them what information or knowledge I might have, to give them the best answer that they can then use to go look for other answers or other questions. And so, yeah, not a cult leader. I don't want people to think just like me. Never was interested in that. It always seemed like a bad idea. But so I think that's probably enough on the subject, but I thought it'd be good to address it specifically, because I don't think we've really done a specific video about just communicating and so forth. So hopefully this has answered some questions I don't know anyone has, or answered some questions nobody knew that they should have, or whatever. And again, anything you want to know, write to me. I'll tell you where I'm at, who I am, what I know, and whether I can help or not. And send me emails at shifrasmagicalcove@gmail.com, or Facebook, friend request on Facebook. And and we grow with the community as we find out what the community wants to know. And that's why we're here. We're not here just to give you our perspective on everything, but on what you're interested in learning more about. So this is Siofra's Magic Alcove, and I'm Siofra Bradigan. Blessed be.